I'm so happy today to have Bob Weinstein back on the show. It's been a while since you were on the
It
show,
has been. You
but
had me during my city council campaign a
yeah,
year ago. So it's great to be here and
yeah.
thank you.
Thanks for coming. And we're here to talk about the Parks levy that's on the November ballot in a couple weeks, as of recording this. And I was gonna say I kind of wish you were on city council because there's a lot of financial, like fiscal stuff that I feel like we're kind of rudderless sometimes in the city. And you're I think the Oregonian and these people describe you as a financial watchdog, which seems
Right.
appropriate.
In the article the other day, I think Shane Kavanaugh described me as a self-styled fiscal watchdog for the city.
Okay, yeah, seems accurate to
And when I
me.
ran for council, I was sort of running on fiscal responsibility.
Yeah,
Said the budget's the most important thing the council can do because that ends up controlling all the policy for the subsequent year.
for sure. Yeah, and yeah. So this is a parks levy that is on the November ballot. I have my ballot right here, and I'm gonna try to cover myself. But it is not a flat kind of continuation of the previous levy, right? This is an
Right. It's
increase.
a 75% increase in the current levy. The current levy is 80 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. This is a dollar 40
Right.
per thousand of assessed value. And it will generate about 86 million, the city estimates, in its first year. And we can get into this later, but unfortunately, only 3 cents goes to capital maintenance. And everybody knows we have a huge capital maintenance problem that will yield about 2 million a year. It won't even make a dent in the 600 million backlog. And that's a key reason why I oppose this ballot measure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was telling you before we were recording, like one of the reasons I want to do this is I watched the Oregonian, I don't know what you call that, editorial interview they did, and you were on there, and I'll put a link in there to that video. But some of the stuff that the city was saying just made me so angry that, like, even what you just said, like, because a lot of the talking points the city often says is, well, this will keep the lights on, this will keep roofs from leaking, and like to me, when you
Yeah,
say three
it,
cents,
yeah, I know they say that they want to imply that this will help address like failing roofs, big capital maintenance expenses that are looming out there. It won't. It just keeps the operational side whole. And frankly, if this passes in 5 years, we'll have another levy with another huge increase. It's a failed model to fund parks, and that's why I'm urging people to vote against it.
yeah. And you had some way of putting it that I thought was accurate, but I wrote down here like if you care about parks, this is kind of a great way to ruin them because
Right.
it's not really addressing some of the core
Yeah,
issues.
this first I want to make clear I love parks,
Yeah.
and people I talk to who are voting no on this love parks. That is not the issue. But there hasn't been accountability or sustainable planning from the Parks Bureau, and that's what we need, not endless tax hikes that don't solve the real problems. The other concern, and we can talk about this also, it's considered a regressive tax. It will, as taxes and fees rise, hit working families, small businesses, and senior citizens the hardest while failing to address some of the outstanding, crucial park issues for the long term.
Yeah, and you had touched on that in the Oregonian interview, and I thought that was really interesting because you mentioned the stat about people not having like a $400 savings, and that's
Right,
kind of right in this ballpark.
right. There was just a poll that showed that for Oregon, not Portland alone, uh, about 37% of the people could not find $400 if they had an emergency.
Right. Yeah.
And then the other thing, senior citizens, a lot of seniors
Yeah.
are on rely on Social Security. The average in Oregon is $1,931 a month. About a third of seniors rely on that for their sole income. And yet the city, the county, and other governments keep layering tax and fee increase after tax and fee increase,
Right.
and this is just another one.
Yeah, and we're that's what I was gonna just as a backdrop thing. We're often touted as like one of the highest tax regions in the country. especially in Multnomah County. And yeah, it hits those people extra hard. And I just thought, like, some people might think, oh, that's a talking point to bring up seniors, but we do have this like aging in place population
Right.
here that's been reported on a lot in the past year or so. So you're right about that for sure. But I just wanted to get started by saying like, or just have you kind of explain because an audit came out about the Parks Bureau what like a week ago or so, and
Right. It came out on the 15th, coincidentally, the same day that ballots were mailed
yeah,
to voters.
and I briefly kind of read it, but obviously you know way more about it. So I want your take on it. But it seemed pretty scathing.
It was a scathing, blistering audit. And if you read it closely, you could see that they said the Parks Bureau for years has failed to do what they should have done, what they were told they needed to do. Um, for example, the audit says as of September of 2024, the Bureau reported that 86% of its assets, playgrounds, parks, restrooms, are in very poor or very bad condition. They estimated it would cost between 550 and 800 million to restore them to a reasonable level of wear and tear. And then they also reported an operational funding gap, meaning that after all this time, and we can get into the details later, Parks Bureau has still not secured a long-term funding plan for many of the programs and services it provides. Uh, Second, it said Parks has committed to funding the construction of new assets, including with SDC funds, without identifying a funding source for ongoing maintenance. Um, Meaning they're building parks and
Right.
other assets, facilities, they don't have the money to maintain it. And a basic rule of budgeting, don't build what you can't maintain.
Right.
And that's what they're doing. And City Hall, through this ballot measure, is trying to focus our attention away from that. And then, thirdly, and it relates directly to the ballot measure that we're talking about, uh, it said, and I'll read this, best practices recommends that agencies show taxpayers they have exhausted cost saving measures before requesting new revenue. Makes sense.
Hmm.
We found that parks did not offer these assurances. This means that the public received a request for levy funding without evidence that parks had systematically pursued savings. Parks risks not providing the public with important data to inform their decisions by taking this approach. So that's the basic issue.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does seem like a chronic, to me at least, like not really isolated to the Parks Bureau, but it almost seems like they're the worst offender as far as like we're gonna build this, but we have no plan of sustaining it or keeping this
And we can talk about
operational.
they've been told for years to get a plan, but just getting to the audit, the city administration's response was, "We agree with the recommendations. We'll have a long-term plan in place by 2028."
Okay.
I've talked to some people who have expertise in developing long-term financial plans. It doesn't take 3 years to do
Yeah,
that
right.
if people are serious about it.
And it's not a new thing, right? This idea to develop a plan's been around since 2020 or
Well, earlier, in fact, going back to 2013, and what we can get into that, what the city's own budget office said. But the point is, the city says we'll have a plan in 3 years. How long will it take them to implement the plan? Probably another year or two, and that's when we'll have another levy, if this should pass, asking us to substantially raise taxes for parks.
yeah.
It's an unsustainable model.
Yeah. And one thing I was going to bring up too is, the $1.40. I know that earlier this year, I think there was like multiple numbers thrown around, right? There was the current, because the current's what, 80
The
cents?
current's 80 cents,
Yeah.
right?
And I think there was conversation early in the year about $1.20, but somehow,
Well, they even were talking about $1.60. And apparently the city council had discussions with Portland Metro Chamber and they agreed on the $1.40. And I'm not speaking for the Metro Chamber, but what I heard them say in the interviews was they supported it as long as the city made no further cuts to public safety, which is a big
Right,
issue for them.
right. Yeah, and I'm just pointing that out because it's to me it's a substantial increase. Like this isn't you know, if you're currently paying the previous levy, this will be an increase from that. It's
Right,
not the same, and
right. And one of the things that I think is important is you can't just look at this increase in isolation. You know, the city says the median homeowner who has an assessed value of 221,000 will pay $10 a month or over 130 more a year. People whose property is assessed at over the median, half the properties will pay substantially more than that. But it needs to be kept in context. This isn't the only tax or fee that's been raised. You know, in the last 5 years, property taxes for many homeowners have increased. Uh, in the last, I think in July, there were increases for utilities, water, sewer,
mm-hmm,
storm
mm-hmm.
water, that totaled nearly 10%. It was a 6.34% increase in the fee. And for the first time, administratively, the utility implemented passing on finance charges of 2.95% for anyone who uses a credit
The
card or
card,
debit
right?
card
Yeah,
to pay their bills,
and that's
which I,
been consistent for the past at least 2 years. I know I was talking about this yesterday. PGE has had these 20-30% increases whatever every year,
right,
and that adds up for you, like you're saying, homeowners, everyone really,
right.
renters.
And the city raised parking fees by 25%, tripled rideshare fees, 5% hikes to permitting costs. And then it's not the only government doing that. The county, for example, recently raised restaurant inspection fees by 33%. And the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association said it was, quote, a major financial blow that could jeopardize the fragile recovery of our local restaurants and lodging establishments. So, you know, that's one thing. The other thing is, and a problem, is I think many Portlanders who, as you already said, are facing one of the highest combined tax rates in the country, also feel that their tax dollars are not improving services, that they're not getting their money's worth. And that's what's happening. There's a central city task force that has a tax advisory group. They just issued a report. It warned that the city's current path is eroding economic competitiveness and public trust. And particularly, they said the gap between taxes collected and services delivered has eroded public trust. And then you look at, I've already talked about seniors and Social Security, small businesses. This affects small businesses which are the primary job creators in Portland in a couple ways, both directly and indirectly. Their taxes are going to go up and their customers will have less disposable income to spend at the small businesses
Mm-hmm.
because the individuals' taxes are going up.
Right, right.
So,
And there is, yeah, there's, I was just talking about I did a whole thing yesterday about the ODOT tax. So there is like this huge matrix, what I would call matrix of taxes in Oregon, and even more specifically in Multnomah County, that is, in my opinion, creating a very bad economic environment. Like you said, for businesses and individuals, and it creates a reputation that is not good for Portland, and that kind of builds on this stuff that's
well,
been going on since
it doesn't
20.
seem business friendly for sure
Right,
when
right.
they know a lot of small businesses and even some big businesses like Intel are struggling, and there should be a comprehensive effort to help those businesses thrive.
Yeah,
And if the businesses, especially small businesses, are thriving, Portland is thriving. If
yeah.
they're not, then Portland's not thriving.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard obviously when we have, there's like these adjacent counties that don't have some of these,
Right,
taxes, and
right.
people can jump across the river or whatever. And
Or go to Washington County, and they
yeah,
are. People are voting with their feet, and that's not good for Portland.
yeah. I was gonna ask, as far as audits, like I was trying to remember there was a county I think audit that came out a while back about something that kind of resonated with me. But as far as audits come out, how, like 1 through 10, how bad would you put this as far
This
as?
particular audit, I would not have wanted to be the recipient of an audit like
Yeah,
this. Let me put it that way. It clearly outlines what I've been saying, what some other people who oppose this have been saying, and that's that Parks, despite being told it needed to get on a sustainable trajectory, took measures to make sure that that did not happen, and now they want taxpayers to foot the bill.
right. Yeah, and it kind of sets up. I'll probably clip this in here, but this is one of the things that why I was like, I got to do this episode with Bob because I watched the Oregonian thing, and the interim parks director had this quote about, they had just talked about a lot of the issues we just mentioned, like going back to 2020 and even previous to that. That the Parks Bureau knew about this stuff, the CBO knew about this stuff. There's multiple warnings and red flags and whatever. But they had mentioned all that, and then the Parks director said, since that time we've added anywhere between 50 and 100 FTEs.
To that, also the Bureau has grown. The Bureau has grown by about, depends where you start the clock and whether you consider just general fund or all funds, but the Bureau has grown somewhere between 50 and 100 FTE since the levy was referred, the 2020 levy.
And when I hear that kind of stuff, like when you have issues, but you're adding 100 full-time employees, my alarm bells just start going off and be like, why are we adding employees when we know we have this huge backlog, first of all?
Right, and we can get into that. They actually added almost 250 employees since the uh, 2020 levy was approved. But let's go back to 2019 for a second. The Parks Bureau had what they called a Sustainable Future Council work session, and they identified three structural deficits. One's the operating fund, and they said due to the reliance on fees and other external sources, it was not adequate to fund ever increasing operational costs. Number one, capital maintenance funding gap. At that point, they had about a 500 million and 450 million uh, backlog, and they had an inability to fund normal capital maintenance for existing assets with existing resources. And then third, what they call the capital growth funding gap. If they spend SDC funds on new parks and projects, they don't have the money to operate and maintain those assets without diverting assets from other programming. So what that means, they had three serious problems identified, three funding gaps. Then they did the 2020 levy, which I call a cautionary tale. You would have thought that it would address the three funding gaps,
Mm-hmm.
including capital maintenance in the backlog. Uh, what it did, it provided in the first year over $40 million for operations, in addition to general fund money that the Parks Bureau gets. It was supposed to prevent ongoing reductions in park services, a good goal. The 40 million in the first year alone should have been enough if managed responsibly. But what happened is staffing ballooned from 565 to 836 authorized positions, a 48% increase. They built new maintenance intensive assets and amenities while critical repairs did not happen. And as a result, the maintenance backlog exploded from 450, 500 million to 600 million. So instead of becoming a bridge to sustainability, the levy became part of the high tax, subpar performance problems that Portlanders unfortunately know too well. So now we have the 2025 proposal, which doubles down on failure. It's a 75% tax increase from 80 cents per thousand to $1.40 per thousand. Only 3 cents of that, as I said earlier, goes to capital maintenance. That's 2 million a year to address a $600 million problem. There should have been a better balance.
Yeah.
The rest,
Seems like a drop on the bucket.
it is.
Yeah.
It's a small drop in a very big bucket,
Yeah.
and then the rest, 84 million in the first year, goes to maintain the operational bloat and does not ensure that the parks will be preserved for future generations.
Yeah.
So that's a concern.
Yeah, go ahead.
So supporters will say this is a lifeline, we need it, the sky will fall in if this is not approved, and we can talk about that in a minute. But what it does, if this is approved, it locks us into another 5 years of an unsustainable model with levies rising every 5 years and 1 in 5 park assets still in danger of closing, in danger of failure,
Yeah.
because it's not addressing capital maintenance.
And I was thinking, when the Parks Bureau opens like a new park, like I believe they opened one a few years ago in East Portland, and so when they do that, it's basically like I was thinking about it this morning. Is it kind of like, if you go in for like a business loan and you say all I have planned for this is the first like 6 months, and the bank's gonna be like, well, what about the next
Right,
5 years? Like,
right.
is that kind of what we're talking about? It's like
Um,
there's the
the
cost of
Parks
standing it
Bureau,
up, and
the
then
Parks Bureau and the council at the time, and now the current council, is focusing their effort on programs. And as I said, they had a 48% increase in staff in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
That should, we talked about red flags and red lights. You know, they should have known that. And guess what? In fact, they did know that. And let's talk about the city budget office, because it's not just critics like me who are talking about this. The city's own budget experts have been raising red flags since 2013. In 2016, they warned about unsustainable expansion, urged parks to define core services, live within their resources. Um, in 2018, CBO recommended that the council develop a long-term financial plan for parks. Uh,
like the one that's
and
coming out in
right,
2028.
and something that addresses the SDC funded maintenance or system expansion and major maintenance needs. Um, 2020, they repeated that. In 2021, CBO wrote, quote, when Parks referred the levy to the voters, it identified a number of measures it planned to take, including maintenance of parks and park facilities. The levy was explicitly described as a temporary stopgap, a chance for parks to restructure and stabilize.
That's the
They
2020
That's in
one.
2021.
Yeah.
They did
It
not
sounds almost
they did not
identical.
achieve that. In 2024, 25, these are fiscal years, CBO said current spending's untenable and urged a long-term plan. And they also noted that the pressures to the levy include regular COLA, PERS, health increases, labor negotiations, internal transfers, and continued hiring. And that will continue. Those same pressures will exist if this levy passes, because Parks does not have a plan for cost savings. And so,
Yeah, like you mentioned, what, 10 minutes ago or whatever, like it seemed like, I think that was from the audit you were quoting, but it seemed like there was not good faith as far as creating a cost saving.
they
There's been nothing, right?
the audit, as well as the city's budget office, urged or that they have cost savings. The audit criticized Parks for not doing that, not being able to show voters we made substantial cost savings. We have more cost savings planned before we're asked to just accept their word that a 75% Parks tax increase
Right,
is
right.
needed. It's silly. So basically, the message from Parks has been consistent. They keep kicking the can down the road without developing a long term sustainable plan that aligns with available resources and, importantly, achieves a better balance between the operation side and the maintenance side, the capital maintenance side. And, you know, uh, here's an example that was brought to my attention. The city in Parks is proposing North Portland Aquatic Center.
Hmm.
Great project. I'm all for swimming pools so that kids, especially, learn how to swim. They live near the river, they go to the ocean. Basic skills for
And it
swimming should be taught.
and it's also something I know, like there's a lot of aging pools that we've had and such.
Right.
Like
In
the
fact, they closed the Columbia pool
yeah,
because they failed to maintain it.
yeah.
So, that's a huge issue. So it's a great project, but the budget that they have established for it is 91.5 million. That's nearly double the 47 million that Lake Oswego spent recently on a high quality multi-pool facility with a gym, fitness room, and community space. Why does Portland's proposed pool cost twice as much for similar amenities? So, from my perspective, when you look at that, it seems Portland is overspending on new assets like that project without justification, while neglecting existing assets which are crumbling and not providing a comprehensive plan
Yeah.
to address the $600 million
Yeah. And
dollar
that's
backlog.
arguably the most affluent city in Oregon, right?
Right.
And they're doing it at half the cost of
Right,
Portland.
and they have a 25-meter pool, which is considered a competition pool for the college university level and therefore high school level too. Um, I haven't seen it, but I've seen photos of it, and it seems like it's a beautiful facility.
Yeah.
Why are we building one that costs twice as much? Or why don't we build two, use that as a model, and put one in North Portland and one in
Yeah.
another part of the city that is lacking an
Yeah.
aquatic
Seems like for
facility?
90 million, you could maybe even have three. Like that's a lot of money, but yeah. I don't know. It is fascinating how it just seems to be this chronic issue of they're very good at opening new facilities or new programming or features for the community, but there's no consideration of how to pay for it or how to continue
Right,
it.
which there should be. How
Yeah.
much is this going to cost to operate? How much is it going to cost to maintain short term and long term?
Yeah.
And it's not there.
Because it's like that's the fun and easy part is like creating new stuff,
Right.
but paying for it and making it work for 5, 10 years,
Yeah.
that's the hard part,
I
right?
mean, politicians, in my experience, love ribbon cuttings.
Right.
They love opening a new
Getting those
project,
big
but
scissors.
not asking the hard questions. Do we have the money to maintain this so that in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, it's not being shuttered because systems are failing or
Because
the
no,
roof is
yeah, nobody thought about
failing?
that stuff. And
Right.
yeah, it's just, yeah, it's, I don't know, it seems like a real issue here. And I was just, I don't know if that's like a ticking time bomb financially. Like, I don't know what happens with, like, what happens when the backlog just gets to be like
Well,
billions
in
and
the audit, they have a quote from a parks manager, not the director, presumably, that says even if we got a $600 million check today, we would not be able to
fix all
address the
that.
$600 million
Yeah.
dollar backlog in a timely manner. I don't think, and it's my understanding, that parks, if you ask them, can we see a prioritized list of $600 million in
Like a
projects?
triaged
It,
list
it,
of,
it doesn't exist. They may have a few, but not. They can't tell you what
right.
the 600 million is in any kind of priority order.
Some kind of order of operations. And that
Right,
tells you a lot about where their focus is, right? Like, if they haven't figured that part out, like, that seems
right,
pretty critical, right?
right. The other thing I want to touch on is our parks are well funded. They are not underfunded. It's a matter of where the money is spent, how the money is spent. A couple spending related data sources show that. For example, the Trust for Public Lands publishes a comparison of park spending for the 100 largest cities
Oh,
in the
okay.
United States.
Interesting.
And Portland scored one of the few that scored a 100 in the investment side, which means they're spending
Right.
relatively more. Portland spends $318 per person versus the average of 192. Um, and that includes, by the way, monetizing volunteer time. Both numbers go down if you take the volunteer time out. So we're well up in the upper quartile of spending. And again, it's how things are being spent. And one of the things that came up in the Willamette Week interview was parks started a discounted or free program for low income people. Great goal if you can afford it. However, they did not require people to verify their economic status
Okay.
like people do for Medicaid or
Right.
SNAP food
So,
benefits
so
or other
nobody
things.
abuses it.
So they were
Yeah.
asked, um, do you know how many people you've approved who are ineligible? And they don't know because they don't collect that data.
Right, right.
So,
That's a
you
good example of just bad fiscal policy and bad fiscal
right.
management.
I mean, it may be a great goal to do that, but if you're going to do that, make sure that if you're spending millions more per year, that it's targeted to the people that you said
Right, right.
you're addressing.
People that could actually use it, and
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, no, it's I was gonna mention too, you had some interesting stuff about when we were talking about employees and whatnot. I did want to mention it when I was Googling it yesterday, it's interesting because they're like your numbers I think are pretty accurate with the FTEs. And that's a lot of full-time employees, first of
Right.
all. But they also had there's a bunch of numbers that came up anywhere from like over 3,000, and a lot of those are seasonal employees.
There's a number of seasonal employees
And I
as
remember,
well.
talking to a young guy like a couple years back who did that seasonally, and it seemed like it was just like an awesome gig and it was fun. And but I think there's a lot of that I don't know, the spending that we're talking about that's kind of like, is that necessary? Like, especially when you have that many paid employees, it's
Right, especially when your budget is not sustainable.
right,
And
right,
now we've learned that in this year, the current fiscal year, several months after they adopted it,
yeah,
the city has a $27 million fiscal gap
right.
and counting, I would imagine.
Is that the one I was talking on some episodes recently about the business tax shortfall? Is that related, or is that
Some of
yeah?
it is probably from that. They said that 16 million. Well, first, they didn't release the whole fiscal gap at the same time. They did one day and a week
Okay,
later.
it's kind of spaced
So the
out.
one they did one day was 16 million. 12 million was from lower taxes, business or other taxes. They would not say what the 4 million was for some odd reason.
Hmm.
A week later, they said we have another $11 million fiscal gap because the mayor had put in the budget that he recommended to the council and that the council approved $11 million in state funding for homeless programs.
Hmm.
That 11 million did not materialize.
Okay, so it's kind of a preliminary. They were counting on that, and
They
it
were
didn't.
counting on
Yeah.
that. It didn't happen.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't really know some of that. But I was going to mention, yeah, like you had some interesting stuff about, and I don't know if this is about parks specifically, but communications FTE in the city.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for raising
And
that.
I just thought it was interesting because there's a lot of people getting paid a lot of money to do communications.
Well, let's touch on that because, parks and the advocates are saying if this isn't approved, we're going to have to cut a lot of park staff and
It's doom and
so on and
gloom,
so
and
forth.
yeah,
They may have to cut some park staff because they overstaffed from a budget perspective. They
right.
can't afford to pay without a 75% tax
I
increase.
mean, they've got
But
seven
but they
hundred
can
people.
mitigate it by looking at the city as a whole. And a great example is the city's communication staff. I went to a meeting last year when I was running for city council, and Michael Jordan, the city administrator now, was talking about the transition plan. And he talked about the four centralized offices that they had created as part of the transition, in addition to the deputy city administrators and so on. And then, as an example, he referenced the communications staff. And he said, yeah, we now have a centralized office. We also have 85 communication staff in the 6 service areas. I mean, do the math. That's like 14 communications persons per
Yeah,
um,
services.
service area.
Yeah,
And he said, and this is after they already created the centralized one. So he says, we'll take a hard look at that, the 85. But to date, they haven't, or if they have, they haven't done anything. So somebody sent me a Willamette Week story from 2011, and it quotes the very well regarded commissioner, former commissioner Mike Lindbergh, as expressing alarm that the city communication staff had grown from 22 in 2003 to 28 in 2011. He said, that's a pretty big price tag. It's just continually grown. If I were mayor, I would take a very hard look. So there were 22 communication staff in 2003, 28 in 2011. Now there are 85, and there still has been no hard look. So when the city council, if you remember, they did a little poll sort of asking people, would you cut parks first or police
Right,
first?
right.
So they framed the choice very narrowly, parks versus police. And you have to wonder what citizens would actually prioritize if giving a meaningful option. Parks versus redundant communication
Right,
positions, as an
right.
example. So essentially, the council has chosen to expand administrative overhead rather than make difficult budget decisions. I think it's time for a hard look. And if they did that, they could mitigate any reductions in park operations.
Mm, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
At the
because
city
they have,
level, yeah.
uh, yeah, they have, that was just one example. I'm not familiar with all the positions in city
Yeah. But
government.
you're saying like take a look at those kind of things and if you can free up money in a general fund or
Right.
something, yeah.
You know, just 10 years ago, Mike Lindbergh was saying we have too many, the growth in
Right, right.
communications has,
What and what
and that now it's four times more than we had in
yeah.
2003. Is that the most important city function? Is having all those staff members more important than programs for kids that are brought by the
Yeah,
parks?
or all the stuff that they always bring up of fixing leaky roofs or all
Right,
that stuff. Like,
right.
do you want 100, almost 100 communications people who are basically sending emails and posting social media
I
stuff?
can't
And
imagine what they all do.
yeah,
And even if I did know that, the point is, if the city's facing a fiscal gap, which it is, and if Parks is facing a fiscal gap, which it is, even if this passes, because they're not going to be able to fix, for example, the Multnomah Art Center roof because this isn't generating money for capital maintenance, um, they have to make those decisions, and they're tough.
yeah,
And you know, I've been there in my past, making some very tough budget decisions, but you have to do that if you're going to keep your operations, whether it's a school district or a city, viable.
right. No, it is interesting because it almost seems like that's like a reckoning that the city just does not want to deal with. And at some point, like I can't remember the last time like we cut stuff,
Right.
and I
It,
like you're saying it's hard to do, but it's a reality that you have to.
it's always easier to add people and add programs if revenues are increasing, as long as when revenues go south, you have an elected mayor and council who are willing to say, we need to live within our means. We no longer can afford A, B, or C, whether
Right.
there's some of the new programs that were added, or maybe some programs added 20 or 40 years ago that some of the new programs, if the council looked at them, might conclude they're more important than the old programs and make
Right.
some cuts
Kind of
appropriately.
change stuff that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is because like we mentioned a few times, it's just like that's not the economic reality Portland's in right now. Like we're much more in a contraction mode than
Yeah.
than
I
in
mean,
an
you have a
addition
lot of
mode.
people and small businesses that are struggling to
Right.
make ends
Yeah,
meet.
and you see it, I don't want to say every day, but every week almost there's a restaurant or a bar that's closing
Right.
and yeah, they're
Right.
struggling.
Due to that, due to crime, due to
Yeah.
vandalism and other concerns, and
Hmm.
that needs to be addressed. I think that's what most people care about.
For sure, yeah. Let me see what else I got here. I was gonna ask about I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but the backlog itself, like I don't know. I'm always amazed at these. Like I think Peabot also has like a huge
They apparently
backlog,
have, I can't remember the
several hundred
figure, but
million.
hundreds of millions,
Yeah,
maybe even approaching a billion.
and like I don't know. I'm always trying to like picture it. I guess, or is it just kind of like they'll just identify things that are highly in need of maintenance and just keep adding to that? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
you may not even know. I guess, but
I don't know. But, one of the things too I want to touch on is this is not a do or die vote.
right,
The council, if this fails, and as you know, I hope it does, the council can put another measure before the voters in May while they're developing the budget so that they will know before they approve a budget whether voters approved a levy next May. And one of the examples that I've given is they could, instead of going from 80 cents to $1.40, they could go, for example, and say 80 cents to a dollar, with the 20 cents addition going to capital maintenance. That alone, the 20 cents would generate over 13 million a year, 7 times what this ballot
Right,
measure
right.
would yield for capital maintenance. So it would be, you're still facing a big backlog, but over time it would address a portion of it. To its credit, I guess, and with Olivia Clark, I think, spearheading it, the city is working to develop a comprehensive centralized asset management plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when that is done, if it's done right, uh, the public and elected officials will know exactly what the backlogs are in all the different bureaus. And I think they'll see a very huge price tag if we're going to correct it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
hopefully there'll be a plan in place to do that in some substantial way every year and pick the priority projects and fix them. If roofs are about to collapse at an art center, fix the roof before it does.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is cool that I heard that mentioned a few times that that's kind of a way to, yeah, address all these backlogs at whatever bureau we're talking
Yeah,
about. Like there's finally a plan to kind of address that stuff
right.
head on, it seems like.
Yeah, and one of the other things the
But
proponents,
that's it. That's in the pipeline, I should
right?
say. It's not really,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then the question becomes, how do you finance it? Do you float this huge bond? There was a discussion last year of floating. Um, it was a fire bureau bond and possibly parks. I can't remember, but it didn't move forward. Um,
Well,
one of the other things that proponents are saying, the current levy has an oversight committee or board,
okay.
and I don't want to be critical of anybody, but the question is, did they do their job, or if they did, were they ignored? They reported to the Parks Bureau. This measure provides for a similar board to report to the city council. The proponents think that's great. I'm not so sure it is because it's one thing to say the council has oversight. They do broadly over all of city functions.
As
But
far as
the question
budgeting,
is,
yeah.
do you want all these decisions to be made more political than they need to be,
Right,
rather than
right.
professional staff getting the oversight information and then going forward to the council?
Yeah. Because it does seem like, I don't know, I've talked about this a few times, like we were trying to get away from this, like, counselors sort of politicizing bureaus, like, well, they used to have bureaus. I mean,
Right.
so, but I don't know, it just seems like sometimes we're kind of getting back to that again with stuff like
Right, and
that of like,
that's identified in the audit as a problem,
okay,
political pressure for certain projects. For example, they reference Mayor Wheeler got a $500,000 allocation for something that he wanted. It was done. Again, no plan to operate or maintain it.
mm-hmm.
And then there was a couple other examples to the tune of they would have required or do require the projects that the different council members got approval for, almost $5 million a year for maintenance. So built, no money to maintain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking too, I had a thing on here about, because a lot of this stuff, like I try to really highlight and bring attention to, but I have this built-in expectation, at least up here, that people will just bring these taxes upon themselves. But hopefully, at some point, people will stop, or like it's a real reality that they can't afford it. But I was just curious, like if it does pass, I had on here, don't count on this really helping Portland's economy. But what would you say to people if it
No,
does?
I think if this passes, it basically says in 5 years we'll have another huge proposed increase in the parks levy because it will maintain the model that we have today.
Right.
That's a failed model. It's not sustainable. The same pressures that the city budget office identified when you add 200 personnel and you give raises and benefits increase. And I understand that. I want city employees to be well paid. That's not the issue. The issue is when you add 48% more in a
Right.
5 year period, when you're told you can't afford to do that, if this levy's approved, that will continue.
Right. And we're still only spending whatever percentage that is, the 2 cents
Right.
on some of these real issues. And
Of the
so
86 million, 84 million in year one goes to operations and to fuel that model, and 2 million will go to capital maintenance.
wow, yeah.
Yeah,
So I was just thinking, yeah, it's maybe another 5 years until this theoretical next levy of the same issues of like
right.
this park over here may face closure because of
Right.
some issues, or
No, exactly. And the capital maintenance problem is not going away.
right.
There still is not a long-term plan. They've been told for years, since 2013. The city budget office, we recommend a long-term financial plan. We recommend something for capital maintenance.
Hmm. And
And
it just, yeah, it
it's,
seems like it's not baked into that at this
right. And
point.
we're being asked to wait another 3 years after the audit report that just came out
Right. To have that plan. Is
to
that,
have a plan.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I was just trying to think of like to give people some expectation of, if it does pass, I think some people that might be some feel goodism for them in the sense that, yeah, parks have this money, but you're still going to hear about the same sort of chronic issues of closures and maintenance and all
Right.
that stuff. And
Yeah, this will lock us into another 5 years of unsustainable growth, with levies rising every 5 years, and with 1 in 5 park assets still at risk of failure or closure within 15 years. That's the situation today. This proposed 75% tax increase does virtually nothing to address the latter.
yeah. And obviously it's more money too. Just more money for the individual. Yeah, let's see. I don't know if I have anything else on here about this, but if there's anything else you want to mention before I got some funny stuff at the end I can ask you, funny
Yeah,
questions.
no, I think I've got the information out that I think people need to think about before they vote or while they're voting, and just ask, can we continue to raise taxes and fees one after another, especially in this bureau, which has been told for years. The red lights were flashing
Right.
since 2013,
Yeah.
and they made some choices that unfortunately put us in the situation that we're in today.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's when you were talking about like if this would not pass, you know, there's a May option. I always just maybe it's because I do this show and I talk about elections a lot, but this is one of the few things on the November ballot this year. There's elections every November and May, so
Right.
like there's always options for people to raise money if that's what they're doing or whatever's going on. There's always a couple elections a year, so I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah,
You know,
so next May they could have something that keeps a substantial portion of the operations. And if they look at the big picture, like the example that we talked about, the 85 communication staff, and made some changes, they could mitigate any changes that would reduce park operations. I think there still would be some, but not to the extent that the proponents are saying, if this fails, the sky's going to fall in. Well, that's only if the council fails to make some tough decisions.
yeah, yeah. I've kind of trained my brain too in this, at least here in the Northwest, to like I don't know. When I hear that it's like do or die vote involving money, I've just learned that that's usually not, it's like a trick. Like it's because you'll see a lot of time go by and things don't really go the way that, the
Right,
proponents would say they would go.
right.
So it just kind of tells you that it's just kind of a proposition to get you to vote one certain way. But yeah, I was just thinking, is there anything you want to say about because you mentioned like Michael Jordan's transition team, and I've talked about that a lot this year of how just the whole process was super expensive, and I think they're sunsetting some of it now, but it's
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, the new government's costing a lot more than the proponents
right, right.
said during the charter amendment that passed in 2022.
But as far as like I guess the transition team itself, is that still in place and like
I,
doing stuff?
I, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's okay. I'm
one
just
would think not, since the
yeah,
transitions occurred.
yeah.
And
It's been like a
did
year
those
ago, wasn't it?
positions go away, or did people just go back to other positions and they were just
Yeah.
sort of loaned to the transition?
No, it's a good point though, because I think about that stuff a lot of even outside of this bureau, like you mentioned, some of the just overall city costs, it seems like there's a
Right.
lot of stuff there that maybe isn't the best investment.
Well, and one thing that's happening is the city is recruiting a new city administrator.
Right. Mike
So,
Jones
right, he's
eventually going to
leaving at
leave.
the end of the year. So
Yeah.
hopefully they'll find a good person with experience, possibly from outside of Portland, although, we'll see who applies. Um, but find somebody who can help the council get the city back on a sound financial
Yeah.
footing.
A lot of the stuff we were talking about could
Right.
help with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was curious, can you just tell people in a few minutes, I guess, about, I was talking about this recently with people about just how important that role is, like, I guess, especially with this new form of
Yeah.
government.
Well,
Like,
the new form of government, the city administrator, under the direction of the mayor, runs day to day operations. The city administrator's in charge of every bureau, gives direction to every bureau, recommends policies to the council, which generally are going to be accepted. Um, so that's very different than the old model where you had commissioners running departments, even if in bureaus, even if they had not the slightest
right,
qualifications.
right.
So I think that's a good result of the charter change is shifting from elected officials running bureaus to a professional running
Yeah.
day to day.
And it's sort of like a position that a lot of municipal governments, like if you have a lot of experience running those day-to-day operations with a lot of city components, it seems like someone who's really good at that could help a lot with, here in
Right.
Portland. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of people don't really
So yeah, he's
understand.
been unwilling to recommend tough choices, and when I remember a quote of his when it appeared that the costs of the new government were substantially more than what the Charter Commission and what the city itself told us it would cost. He said, I thought somewhat flippantly, government costs money.
I've never heard that. That's interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
he gets a lot of criticism for his own. I know, his salary is a lot of money, and some people might say that's warranted for all the tasks and stuff. But yeah, I'm definitely not happy with the cost of the new government.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Well, hopefully they'll get a new administrator and
Help out with some of
who
it.
has experience and is willing to recommend whatever the appropriate actions are so we can
Yeah.
live within our means. I mean, that's critical.
Yeah. Well, and like I said at the beginning of the episode too, like I feel like, sometimes I feel like you're one of the only ones like doing this stuff and you're not even like in the government
Right.
officially, but
Right.
you're just trying
Not
to
even unofficially.
advise. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, this is an important issue. And, I gave it a lot of thought before I decided, okay, I'm going to be a little more public on this because um, it's important for, as I said earlier, for people to see the big picture. This is not just $10 or $20 or $40 a month for somebody. It's that on top of all the other increases that we've had.
Right.
And a lot of people can't afford it.
Yeah, it's a lot of overlapping, stacking
Right.
costs for
Exactly.
people. Um, and you just said something that reminded me of. I thought I had it on here. Anyway. Oh, well, I was just gonna like when you said big picture. I think when I was watching the Oregonian thing, I thought of that. Like, do you think sometimes, whether it's the city or the bureaus themselves, like they just have an inability to look at the big picture, and it's very. I guess maybe that's a component of just working in government is like you're always focused on the now and the short term and
Well, I would
people pleasing
imagine
and
on a bureau by bureau basis, that's the case. They're focusing on their own needs. Um, but then it's the job of the elected officials. In our case, the mayor recommends a budget to the council. The
Mhm.
council works its will on the budget and it goes into effect. Um, you know, that's how they control that. So things come in. I mean, I was a school superintendent and a city council member and mayor, and you know, budget requests come in, and you can't necessarily afford to give everybody their requests
right, right.
because it exceeds available
E-
resources.
Everyone's gonna
What?
ask for
Yeah, I mean, one of the
yeah.
interesting things to me also, as somebody who dealt with public budgets for a long time, last year we were surprised by this huge fiscal gap. It went, I can't remember the figures exactly, but 70 million, then 90 million, then 100 million. Well, I think the city, at least administration, knew of that or should have known of that when the FY25 budget was presented, because, in fact, from sources inside City Hall, I think that is the case, because anybody does projections.
Right.
You don't just adopt a budget. You look at,
Right,
2 or 3 years
you're
out
not just looking at one
to
year.
see, right,
Yeah.
I mean, I used to do that. Um, so I think that has been happening in Portland, but the information isn't getting from one part of the city to the elected
Mm,
officials.
mm. Some
Yeah,
siloing or something in that
I,
sense, or
you
whether it's
know, it's sort
intentional or
of,
yeah.
it's like this new $27 million gap. And maybe it is all new, that they had no knowledge that revenues might be declining, especially on the business side. But they have a serious problem. It's not going to get better until the economy here gets better. And
Yeah.
that's what I think needs to be focused on. How do we make Portland thrive? And when Portland thrives, we wouldn't be having some of these discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, okay, I think that's kind of all I had here. I'll ask you a few of these new goofy questions I've been asking. I don't even remember if I asked you all the normal ones I do a long time ago.
I don't know either.
Some of these new ones. Do you have a animal or creature you're most afraid of? Like most people say, like snakes or spiders or something. Or
I Not off the top of my head. I think if I was out in the woods and a cougar or a mountain lion
yeah,
went by, I'd
be pretty
yeah. I mean, I
terrifying.
used to run into wolves in Alaska and never felt threatened by them.
I'm
So
sure. Yeah, I was just thinking. I'm sure there's bears
yeah, and
up
there's
there,
bears. Yeah,
and
I
yeah.
mean, I could literally open up my door, and I lived in the city, and a black bear might be out there, and then my dog would go out and tree it, and I have to call my dog back to say, "Come on, let the bear come down." But yeah, you'd be walking around or hiking and run into bears, and as long as you weren't, doing something you shouldn't. For example, if you run into a cub, mom's around,
Right. You don't want to
so
mess with the
yeah,
mom. Yeah.
go the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. I always forget all the things. Like brown bears aren't as aggressive, right? Black bears are a little.
That's
I
my
don't.
understanding. And the island I lived on, the very southern tip of Southeast Alaska, only had black bear.
Okay.
And my understanding is they're considered a little more dangerous than brown bear, even though brown bear, grizzly bears are bigger. And
Right. Okay.
but but
I've,
yeah, so
that's a good answer. I've always heard too that, and I hope to never encounter any kind of bear. I've heard a couple things. One, the polar bear is the only bear that like hunts humans. Like if you encounter one, it'll like hunt you. Like
yeah,
that's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true. Somebody can comment on that. And then also I've heard bear spray is like actually super. It's one of the best ways to actually, if you are in that situation, to escape is to use
oh,
bear
that could
spray.
be.
I don't know because they're just so irritated by it. Um, let's see here. Do you have a aside from all the financial stuff? Do you have a pet peeve, like something dumb that just drives you crazy about society or being like people, traffic or something like that? I don't know.
Uh, Potholes.
Yeah,
You
just running
know,
over the
I
potholes. Yeah.
live right off of Northwest 23rd, which I don't know all the major city streets in Portland, but I would say that's one of the
It
worst
does seem like it's
in condition
deteriorated. Yeah.
from Lovejoy to Thurman and Vaughan. And part of that, and it's terrible. There's potholes. There's a crosswalk. I live on Raleigh Street, so there's a crosswalk on 23rd, crossing 23rd. If you're on Raleigh Street, there's potholes in it,
Like in the crosswalk
in the
itself.
crosswalk,
Okay, which seems
and
like it.
people. I saw an elderly, more elderly than me person stumble in it once. I talked to some people. They've seen people fall in
Yeah,
different
it
crosswalks
does seem like a
because of
liability.
that.
Yeah.
It is a liability, and the city should be addressing that aggressively.
Yeah.
You
Especially in an area like that that is super it's like a walkable shopping area
right.
and all that stuff and
Yeah. In fact, when I was running, I did this little video. I had a friend drive me down the street. So the car is bouncing all around. And I said, there's two ways of getting a massage in Northwest Portland. One is you can drive down Northwest 23rd. And then I pointed the camera at a like there's a guy named Steve Nunley who's a masseuse. In fact, that's who I see in another shop. Or you can go to a professional massage business.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's absurd. And what the city told me when I was running is that they're not going to do anything until the streetcar goes in. Well, it's been
Oh,
bad for at least 10 years. I don't know when or if the streetcar is going to come in, but minimally the city ought to go in there and do what they've done elsewhere, put a, do grind it down a bit, and there may be some rails underneath there. So I don't know all the specifics, but put a thin coat of asphalt down so it's
yeah.
smooth.
Some
So
kind of
so you don't go,
patching or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's terrible. So that's a pet peeve.
Okay. Yeah, I like how
Potholes are definitely a pet peeve.
I would agree with that. Do you have a favorite? Do you like sushi at all?
I do like sushi.
Do you have a favorite sushi roll, or just any type of sushi?
I wouldn't say any, but I actually like one. My daughter lives in Hillsborough, so sometime we go to a place in downtown Hillsborough, and they have a hamachi jalapeno
Oh my god, that
with
sounds
a
amazing.
scallop in it,
That
and it
sounds
is
good.
really, really good.
I love jalapenos, and
Yeah,
usually I'll try stuff with jalapenos, and then it's like you get too much,
right.
and it just start being too hot. But I love that. Sounds amazing. Let's see here. Okay, I was gonna. I mean, should I? Is there a good place to like point people to if they want information about all this stuff that we talked about?
I
Website or
would
something?
say the audit
Just check
itself,
out the audit.
different articles,
Oh
uh,
yeah, I totally
both
forgot.
the Oregonian and Willamette Week had articles about the audit.
Yeah, I totally forgot to mention. Yeah, the endorsements. The Oregonian endorsed and no vote on this.
Yes, they did.
Willam Week went the opposite direction, but they're both. I'm sure they're both interesting reads for
Yeah, I think
people.
if people look at that, because even Willamette Week's endorsement recommending a yes vote, if you look at what they wrote, it's very critical of park operations. They sort of made the case as to why we can't trust parks because they haven't been trustworthy given
Right.
what we've talked about, but trust them and vote yes.
Yeah, I
So,
thought it
yeah,
was a strange endorsement for sure. It
yeah,
was like, yeah, there's a lot of history of bad faith here with the
yeah.
bureau, but whatever.
I think if people read both, especially the Oregonians, they'll
You can make up your
and
mind.
the Oregonian mentioned the council can come back with another one,
Right,
a
right.
better plan.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll put the links in there for that. Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna play this little. I haven't done this in a while, but I bet I'll do this little Price is Right game I've been doing. And you can take this home if you want. But I thought since we're talking money and all that, so I do this thing where I go to grocery outlet up the road
Okay.
and I find really cheap stuff, and I'll give you three chances to guess how much I paid for this. These are, if you're just listening, garden veggie wavy chips. But you can take a couple guesses, and
I'm gonna say $1.49.
it's that's pretty close to the levy amount actually, but it's less than $1. I'll give you that
Wow,
clue.
79 cents.
Pretty close. It was, I think, 68 cents I paid for this.
Wow.
And you're welcome to take this if you want.
Well, that's okay. I got some chips at home. I
Okay.
don't need another bag, but I appreciate
Well,
it.
you got pretty close. And yeah, this is less than the levy's asking for.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, yeah, Bob, thanks for coming, and you're always welcome back
Yeah. Well,
anytime.
thanks for having me. I
Yeah,
appreciate it. I think it's an important election and people need to become as informed as they can be.
for sure. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Bob.
Okay.